Evan Rowe had always preferred quiet places. That was why he lived far away from busy streets, tall buildings, and noisy crowds. His small desert town was the kind of place most people passed through without stopping, but Evan liked it. The open sky, the soft wind, and the endless sand helped him forget the fast, complicated world he had once lived in. Most days, he worked as a wilderness guide. Travelers sometimes hired him to show them the safe paths through the desert. He knew the land better than anyone else, but when he wasn't guiding people, he kept to himself. He read old books, fixed small things around his cabin, and took long walks in the dunes. He talked to people only when he had to. Life was simple, and that was exactly how he wanted it. One night, Evan needed a few supplies: water filters, batteries, and a new lantern. The small store in town stayed open late, so he climbed into his dusty truck and drove down the uneven road. The sky above him was full of bright stars. In the desert, the stars looked close enough to touch, and Evan often found himself staring up at them, wondering what else might be out there. He reached the store, collected what he needed, and chatted briefly with the old shopkeeper. The conversation stayed light: weather, road conditions, nothing more. After paying, Evan stepped outside and inhaled the cool night air before getting back into his truck. As he drove toward home, the desert looked peaceful, just as it always did. But a few miles later, something strange happened. A bright light streaked across the sky, a quick flash, almost like a falling star. At first, Evan assumed that was exactly what it was. But this light didn't fade away like a normal meteor. Instead, it grew brighter, leaving a long, glowing tail behind it. Evan slowed the truck, watching with growing curiosity. The light dipped lower, then lower still, until it vanished behind a line of rocky hills in the distance. A soft tremor ran through the ground a moment later, so gentle that someone else might not have noticed. But Evan felt it clearly. He sat still, hands on the wheel, unsure what to think. Meteors didn't usually behave like that, and they certainly didn't land close enough for someone to feel the ground move. His first thought was that it could have been a test aircraft from a nearby base. Strange aircraft sometimes flew over this area. People whispered about secret projects, but no one ever knew the truth. Evan told himself it was none of his business. He wasn't the curious type, at least not usually. But tonight something felt different. Something inside him tugged, telling him he should check on it. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe a small aircraft had made an emergency landing. He wasn't sure, but his instincts urged him to turn his truck toward the hills. He argued with himself for a moment. He liked quiet. He liked staying out of things that didn't concern him. Yet he also knew that people sometimes traveled through the desert without telling anyone, and accidents could happen. If someone was hurt, he couldn't just ignore it. With a small sigh, Evan turned the wheel and headed toward the place where the light had fallen. The closer he drove, the more uneasy he felt. It wasn't fear, more like a strange sense of anticipation. The air around him felt charged, as if holding its breath. Even the desert animals seemed to have gone silent. He parked the truck at the base of the rocky hills and grabbed his lantern. The light from the crash, if that's what it was, had disappeared completely, leaving only darkness. Evan climbed the slope, careful with his steps. The sand shifted softly under his boots. When he reached the top, he looked down into a shallow valley and froze. At the center of the valley was a small object half buried in the sand. It wasn't large, about the size of a big camping tent, but it glowed faintly with a soft blue light. The shape was smooth and curved, unlike anything Evan had seen. It didn't look like metal or plastic. It almost looked alive, breathing light in quiet pulses. Evan approached slowly. The air around the object felt cool, though the desert night was warm. A quiet humming sound came from it, like the whisper of wind inside a cave. And then he saw movement. A small figure stepped out from behind the glowing object. Evan's breath caught in his chest. The figure was a child, or at least child. She looked fragile and unsteady, as if tired or scared. Her skin had a faint shimmer under the moonlight, and her eyes reflected light like crystal. Her hair floated slightly, as though gravity didn't fully apply to her. She wore something like a soft suit made of smooth material that shifted colors gently. She wasn't human, at least not completely. Evan knew it the moment he saw her. The child looked at him with wide, shining eyes. She didn't run, didn't hide. She simply watched him, almost studying him, as if trying to understand if he was safe. Evan felt his heartbeat grow louder. He didn't move any closer. He didn't want to frighten her. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open, to show he meant no harm. The child tilted her head, copying his motion as if she was learning from him in real time. He took one cautious step forward. The child didn't back away, but her eyes shifted past him, toward the hill behind. Evan turned slightly, noticing distant lights approaching the valley. Several small lights moved in careful patterns, not like flashlights but more controlled, almost like scanning beams. He couldn't hear any engines, but the lights moved too smoothly to be ordinary. Something about them felt wrong. He didn't know who they belonged to, but their movement suggested they were searching for something. And the only unusual thing in this valley was the child standing in front of him. A soft, frightened sound escaped the child, more like a hum than a cry. She stepped closer to Evan, nearly stumbling. He reacted instinctively, reaching out to steady her. The moment his hand touched her shoulder, he felt a warm, gentle energy flow through his fingertips, not painful, just surprising. The child looked up at him again, and this time, her expression was clear. She needed help. She was afraid of whoever or whatever was coming. Evan knew he couldn't leave her here. It didn't matter how strange the situation was. She was alone, lost, and clearly being searched for in a way that didn't feel safe. "Come with me," he whispered softly, unsure if she could understand. But she nodded. He picked her up gently. She was lighter than he expected. Almost weightless sand carried her away from the glowing object. The lights in the distance were getting closer now, sweeping across the sand like patient eyes. Evan made his way carefully back toward his truck, moving as quietly as he could. He felt the child tighten her small hands around his shirt, holding on as if her life depended on it. As they reached the truck, Evan opened the passenger door and helped her inside. She curled up, her eyes still watching the lights behind them. Evan started the engine, keeping the headlights off to avoid drawing attention. He drove slowly at first, then faster once he reached the open desert road. Only when the hills were far behind them did he let himself exhale. He glanced at the child sitting beside him. She looked tired but calmer now, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the truck's dashboard. Evan didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what he had just stepped into. But he knew one thing with complete certainty. He had found her in danger, and helping her was the only right thing to do. Evan drove through the quiet night with a strange child sitting beside him. The truck hummed softly as the tires rolled over the sandy road. The child watched everything through the window, the stars, the distant hills, the long empty road, as if each thing was new and full of wonder. Every once in a while, she glanced at Evan with those bright, shimmering eyes, as if trying to understand who he was and why he had helped her. Evan kept his eyes forward, but his thoughts raced. He had guided people through the desert dozens of times. He had helped lost hikers, tired travelers, and even injured animals. But nothing like this. Nothing that felt so mysterious and so important at the same time. He didn't know where she had come from. He didn't know why strange lights had been searching the valley. He didn't know why she had been alone near that glowing object. And he didn't know what kind of world he had stepped into by taking her with him. But she was just a child, small, fragile, and overwhelmed. That was enough for Evan. He would help her first. Answers could come later. When they reached his cabin, the desert was completely quiet again. No strange lights followed them. The sky was peaceful, sprinkled with stars like tiny silver seeds across a dark field. Evan parked the truck, then gently opened the passenger door. The child looked at him, waiting for his next move. "It's safe here," he said softly. He wasn't sure if she understood his words, but she seemed to understand his tone. She stepped out of the truck carefully, almost studying the ground before placing her feet on it. Her movements were delicate, graceful, and slightly unsteady, as if Earth's gravity felt unfamiliar to her. Evan led her toward the cabin door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The cabin was small but comfortable. Wooden walls, warm lighting, a tidy kitchen, and a soft couch near a stone fireplace. Evan lived simply, but the place felt safe, something he hoped the child could sense. She looked around with wide eyes, touching nothing but observing everything. Evan grabbed a blanket from the couch and draped it gently around her shoulders. She didn't flinch from his touch. Instead, she held the blanket close as if she liked its soft texture. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She blinked, tilting her head. Evan didn't know what she ate or even if she needed the same food humans did. But he brought out some fruit and a bottle of water. He placed them on the table, then stepped back to give her space. Slowly, she approached the table. She touched the apple first, pressing her small fingers lightly against its red surface. Then she lifted it and held it near her face, as if testing its scent. After a moment, she nibbled carefully. A small expression of surprise crossed her face, followed by a tiny smile. Evan felt something warm open inside him. That smile was gentle and genuine, and it told him he was doing the right thing. The child ate a little more, then sipped the water. She seemed calmer now, still alert, but not frightened. Evan sat across from her, unsure how to communicate. He wished he had some kind of translator. He needed to know her name, where she came from, and what she needed. After a quiet moment, she placed her hand on the table, palm facing up. A soft glow spread across her skin, not bright, just a gentle warm light, like moonlight trapped under her surface. Evan stared, amazed but not afraid. She pointed her glowing hand at herself, then made a soft musical sound, almost like a chiming bell. "Lyra," Evan guessed, using the closest word that came to mind based on the sound. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she nodded. It wasn't just a guess, Evan had understood. He felt a small sense of relief. At least he had her name now. "Lyra," he repeated, smiling a little. She placed her hand on her chest and repeated the sound again, confirming it. Evan then pointed to himself. Lyra repeated it in her soft, musical voice, shaping the word carefully. It came out slightly different, almost as if she added a gentle melody to it, but the meaning was clear. She was learning fast, very fast. That night, Evan set up a small bed for her on the couch. She curled up under the blanket, her eyes following his movements until he sat down in the chair across from her. She seemed to want him to stay nearby. Perhaps the strange world around her felt less frightening when he was close. Before falling asleep, she lifted her hand again. A faint glow shimmered between her fingers. Then Evan felt something warm and soft, like a gentle whisper inside his mind. It wasn't a voice, exactly, but a feeling, a memory. He saw a quick image: Lyra running in a place filled with sparkling trees and floating lights, laughing with joy. The feeling was peaceful, full of innocence. Then the memory faded, leaving Evan breathless. He realized Lyra wasn't just showing it to him by accident. It was her way of telling him something, her way of saying she trusted him, her way of saying she had once been safe, happy, and loved. Evan swallowed, overwhelmed. "I'll help you," he whispered. He didn't know if she understood, but she closed her eyes and relaxed, as if she did. The next morning, sunlight warmed the cabin. Lyra awoke, gently, stretching her small arms. Evan was already up, preparing breakfast and checking the windows. He didn't see anything unusual outside, but he still felt a faint worry in his chest. Whoever had been searching the valley last night might still be looking. Lyra wandered to the kitchen, curious about everything. When Evan placed a bowl of fruit on the table, she smiled again, a small, bright smile that made the room feel lighter. After breakfast, Evan tried teaching her a few simple words: water, table, door, sun. Lyra picked up each word quickly, repeating them with soft musical tones mixed in. She also showed him small flashes of images now and then, nothing scary, nothing harsh, just tiny glimpses of her world or memories that made sense to her. She didn't speak with words, but she communicated with feelings and images, and it made their conversations strangely peaceful. That as the day went on, Lyra began exploring the cabin. She examined books, lightly touched the plants by the window, and stared in fascination at the humming refrigerator. Every small discovery delighted her. Evan found himself watching her with quiet amusement. For the first time in a long while, another presence in his home didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt natural. In the afternoon, Evan took her outside. The desert sun was warm, but a cool breeze blew across the sand. Lyra looked around in amazement. She stepped onto the sand, letting it flow between her toes. She reached out to touch a cactus, then pulled her hand back quickly, sensing its prickly surface without needing to be told. Evan pointed out birds flying overhead, and Lyra followed them with bright curiosity. She seemed to love open spaces, like they reminded her of home. Sometimes, she lifted her hand toward the sky, and the faint glow returned, as if she were calling out, maybe to her family, maybe to someone searching for her. Evan noticed her do it several times and realized something important. She wasn't lost by accident. Someone out there must be trying to find her, but he didn't know how much danger she might be in from others on Earth. The strange lights last night had moved in a way that didn't feel friendly or gentle. Whoever they were, they hadn't seemed like rescuers. That evening, Lyra sat near the fireplace, humming softly. Evan listened to her quiet melody. It was calming, a soft, warm sound that made the room feel peaceful. As the sun set, Evan realized something had changed inside him. Lyra had become more than a mysterious child from the sky. She had become someone he felt responsible for, someone he wanted to protect, not out of fear, but out of a quiet, steady kindness that felt right. When the stars came out again, Lyra pointed toward them. Her eyes shone as if she recognized those distant lights. She placed her hand gently on Evan's arm, sending him another soft image, a tall figure with the same shimmering eyes, reaching out toward her with love and worry. Her mother. The connection faded, and Lyra rested her head on Evan's shoulder. He understood someone out there was looking for her, someone who cared, and Evan knew he needed to make sure Lyra stayed safe until that day came. The night settled around them, calm and quiet. But somewhere beyond the desert, something had begun to move. Something that would soon reach Evan's peaceful world and change everything again. For the next 2 days, Evan did everything he could to make Lyra feel safe. She slowly became more comfortable in his cabin. She learned simple words, explored everything with bright curiosity, and filled the quiet rooms with soft humming sounds that reminded Evan of gentle music carried by wind. But even with the peaceful moments, a quiet worry stayed in the back of Evan's mind. He knew something was coming. The first sign appeared early one morning. Just after sunrise, Evan was outside checking the water tanks behind the cabin when a strange sound reached him, soft, distant, and almost impossible to notice. It wasn't a bird or wind. It sounded like a faint hum, steady and rhythmic, as if something far away was scanning the land. Evan paused, listening carefully. Lyra stepped out of the cabin, drawn by the same sound. Her eyes widened a little, and she looked at Evan with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You hear it too?" Evan asked quietly. Lyra nodded, placing her hand over her heart. A soft glow appeared on her skin for a brief moment, her way of showing she felt something important. Evan gently touched her shoulder. "It's okay. We'll just be cautious." He didn't want to frighten her, but he had a feeling the strange lights that had searched the valley might be getting closer. The desert was wide, but when someone or something wanted to find something, they usually kept trying until they did. Lyra walked to the edge of the yard, looking out across the sand. She lifted her hand, letting the faint blue glow appear again. It pulsed softly, like a quiet call. Evan realized she was trying to reach someone far beyond Earth, someone who cared for her. "I hope they're close," Evan whispered. Lyra looked at him with a small, gentle expression, as if trying to reassure him. Later that day, Evan took her on a short walk through the nearby canyon. He wanted her to get a little fresh air and also learn the small pathways around the cabin. If they ever needed to hide or move quickly, it would help if she knew the area. The canyon walls towered high above them, glowing warm orange under the afternoon sun. Lyra kept touching the smooth stone walls with wonder in her eyes. When sunlight reflected off certain rocks, she would smile as if the colors felt familiar to her, maybe like the shimmering trees from the images she had shed as they walked. Evan taught her simple ideas: left, right, stay, follow. Lyra repeated them with surprising accuracy. She was learning faster than any child he had ever seen. She seemed to absorb information as easily as breathing, but every now and then, she stopped, listening to the air with quiet worry. That distant hum was growing a little stronger. "We'll go back soon," Evan told her gently. She nodded, trusting him. When they returned to the cabin later that evening, the desert sky was painted with soft gold and pink. Lyra sat on the porch steps, humming her gentle melody. Evan sat beside her, watching the sky darken. The moment was peaceful, almost perfect. But suddenly, Lyra stopped humming. Her expression changed. She looked toward the horizon, her eyes narrowing slightly with focus. The glow on her skin brightened for just a moment. "What is it?" Evan asked softly. Lyra lifted a shaking hand and pointed toward the north. Evan looked in that direction, but all he saw was the wide desert stretching into the distance. Then he saw something strange: tiny dots far away, moving slowly across the land. They looked like small drifting lights, too distant to understand clearly. They moved in a straight line, spreading out like a group searching a large area. Evan felt his chest tighten. They were looking for something, and it wasn't hard to guess what. "Come on," Evan said quietly, rising to his feet. "Let's go inside." Lyra followed him quickly, sensing the tension in his voice. Once inside, Evan closed the curtains and dimmed the lights. He didn't want the cabin to be visible from far away. He walked to the window and peeked out. The distant lights were still moving, slow, steady, careful. They didn't look like stars, drones, or flashlights. They moved in a way that felt unfamiliar, as if guided by something more advanced. Lyra moved beside him and gently touched his arm. Through that touch, she shared a brief, silent image. Strange devices floating through the air, scanning a landscape that wasn't Earth. The machines glowed softly, just like the ones outside. Evan swallowed. "The same kind," he whispered. Lyra nodded slowly. Evan realized something important. These things weren't here to help Lyra. They were looking for her. Yes, but not in a kind or gentle way. The machines she showed him in the memory had acted more like trackers than rescuers. He placed a protective arm in front of her. "Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you." Lyra looked up at him with a trust that felt almost heavy, like a responsibility he had never expected to carry. As evening turned into night, the lights came closer. Evan made a quiet plan. He gathered a few supplies, filled water bottles, grabbed extra blankets, and placed them near the door. If they had to leave suddenly, he wanted to be ready. Lyra watched him the entire time, sensing his seriousness. Finally, he knelt beside her. "We might need to take a small trip tonight, just for safety." Lyra placed her tiny hand against his forehead, sending a soft feeling of calm into him. She was scared, yet she was trying to comfort him. "You're a brave one," Evan whispered. The hum outside grew a little louder. It wasn't unpleasant, just strange and steady. It drifted through the desert air like a soft vibration. Evan peeked through the window again. The lights were no longer small dots. They had become closer, floating a few feet above the sand. They glowed with a gentle white-blue light and moved in wide patterns, scanning the ground. Evan couldn't hear any engines. They floated as quietly as feathers, guided by something unseen. Lyra stepped back, clutching the edge of the table with nervous fingers. "It's all right," Evan said softly, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. Evan considered hiding in the cabin, but he knew the floating lights might be able to sense things he couldn't hide. He didn't know exactly how they searched, but he suspected they used methods more advanced than simple sight or sound, so he made a decision. He gently picked up the bag he had packed. "Lyra, come with me." She moved quickly into his arms, understanding immediately. Evan carefully picked her up, and she held onto him tightly, her small hands gripping the back of his shirt. They left the cabin quietly, closing the door without a sound. The desert night was cool and still. The stars shimmered above, but Evan felt none of their usual comfort. He walked quickly through the yard and into the shadows of the canyon path. The floating lights were now close enough that their quiet hum filled the air like a gentle whisper. Lyra buried her face against his shoulder. Though she didn't cry, she stayed silent and strong, trusting Evan completely. They reached the canyon entrance and stepped into the cool shade of the tall rock walls. Here, the lights in the sky couldn't see them easily. The narrow path twisted and turned, offering natural cover. Evan walked deeper into the canyon. choosing paths that led to hidden spaces he had discovered years ago. He knew where the land rose and dipped, where shadows stayed darkest, and where the sound of wind could cover footsteps. As they walked, Lyra gently tugged on Evan's shirt. She lifted her hand and released a tiny pulse of soft blue light, then pointed toward a narrow tunnel-like opening between two rocks. "You want to go there?" Evan whispered. Lyra nodded. He followed her direction. They squeezed into the small opening, which opened into a shallow cave. It wasn't big, but it was hidden well. Evan sat down, holding Lyra close. They stayed quiet, listening to the soft hum outside. The floating lights passed over the canyon entrance, drifting like curious stars. They paused for a moment, scanning the area with gentle beams, then slowly moved away. Lyra looked up at Evan with calm, grateful eyes. The danger for now was moving past them. But as Evan held Lyra close in the cool darkness of the cave, he knew something clearly. This was no longer about one strange night in the desert. Something much bigger was happening. Something that involved worlds beyond Earth, beings beyond humans, and a child who held secrets in her glowing hands. Evan wasn't sure what would come next, but he knew he would face it as long as Lyra needed him. Evan and Lyra stayed hidden in the quiet cave until the soft humming sounds faded into the distance. The desert night outside remained still, as if the world were holding its breath. Lyra leaned against Evan's shoulder, her eyes half closed yet still alert. He could feel her tiny hands gently gripping his arm, as though the little cave had become her only safe space. After a long few minutes, Evan slowly peeked through the narrow opening between the rocks. The floating lights were moving further away now, drifting across the desert like slow-moving lanterns. They seemed to be heading toward the hills beyond his cabin. Perhaps they were done searching here, or perhaps they were simply widening their circles. He sighed quietly in relief. "Looks like we're safe for now." Lyra looked up at him with soft eyes, sensing his calmness. She reached out and touched his hand, sending a warm feeling through his skin. It wasn't a message exactly, more like gratitude, gentle and quiet. "We should stay here for a while," Evan whispered. "Just until dawn." Lyra nodded, settling close to him like a small bird finding shelter under a wing. Evan wrapped his blanket around her shoulders and leaned against the cool rock wall. He watched the stars outside the cave shimmering like tiny sparks. Never had the desert sky felt so mysterious, so full of secrets. When morning finally arrived, they stepped cautiously out of the cave. The early light painted the canyon in soft gold. No humming sounds could be heard now. The sky looked calm and clear, and the floating lights were nowhere in sight. Evan carried Lyra back toward the cabin, taking a longer route through hidden paths just to be safe. When they finally reached the yard, everything looked normal. The cabin stood quietly, the porch untouched, the sand around it smooth except for their footprints. But something felt different. Evan couldn't explain it, but he sensed a quiet change in the air, like the earth itself knew something new was approaching. Once inside, he set Lyra down and checked the windows again. There were no signs of any strange lights or machines. Everything looked peaceful, too peaceful. Lyra wandered to the middle of the room and lifted her hand. A soft blue light shimmered on her palm. She closed her eyes, and Evan watched her face tighten with concentration. She seemed to be listening for something far beyond Earth, something far away but important. Then she opened her eyes, and Evan saw it clearly. "Hope. You sensed something?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded quickly. She stepped toward him and gently touched his forehead. The moment her glowing fingers brushed his skin, an image appeared in his mind. An image not from Earth. He saw a tall woman with shimmering skin like Lyra's. Her eyes were gentle but filled with deep worry. She reached out her hand as if searching for her child. Around her floated elegant shapeships that glowed softly like pieces of the night sky itself. The feeling that accompanied the image was strong, love, longing, and a quiet promise of safety. Then the image faded, leaving Evan breathless. "Your mother," he whispered. Lyra nodded again. Her eyes brightened with a mixture of joy and longing. She pointed toward the sky through the window, then placed her hand over her heart. She wasn't just hoping, she believed her family was near. Evan knelt down beside her. "Do you think they're coming?" Lyra made a soft, hopeful sound, her voice full of confidence. Evan didn't know how soon they might arrive, but he had a feeling the desert was about to become far more strange and magical than ever before. That afternoon, the sky changed. Evan first noticed it when he stepped outside to check the water tank again. The air felt unusually still. The clouds overhead were thin and high, yet they seemed to glow faintly around the edges. A soft shimmer spread across the sky, like sunlight reflecting off invisible glass. He frowned and looked closer. The shimmer grew brighter. It spread from one side of the sky to the other, forming a wide, gentle arc. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't sunlight. It looked almost like the sky itself was opening. "Lyra," Evan called quietly. She stepped onto the porch, her eyes immediately lifting upward. The moment she saw the shimmering arc, her entire body lit with a soft glow. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in pure recognition. Her hands trembled with excitement. The shimmering arc began to deepen in color, turning from pale silver to warm gold. A soft, peaceful hum filled the air, pleasant, calming like the hum of a lullaby. Evan felt the sound in his chest. gentle and warm. Then small shapes began to appear. They emerged slowly, gracefully, like drifting clouds of light. Each shape glowed softly, moving with smooth, floating motions. They grew larger as they descended, taking on more defined forms. They weren't like the machines that had been searching the desert. These shapes felt different, beautiful, elegant, alive with warmth. The sky filled with gentle light as several graceful vessels glided downward. They were shaped like flowing shells, their surfaces shimmering with color as soft as morning mist. Each movement they made was slow and smooth, as if they were dancing through the air. Lyra took a step forward, tears of relief filling her bright eyes. She pressed her hands together near her heart and released a gentle tone, a tiny, musical call. The vessels responded. They paused in the sky, glowing brighter for a moment, as if answering her. Evan felt a wave of calm wash over him. Whatever these beings were, they did not feel threatening. The air around them felt peaceful, protective, full of kindness. One of the vessels lowered itself toward the open desert behind the cabin. Its light dimmed softly as it touched the sand. A quiet door-like opening appeared on its side, releasing a warm breeze of soft-colored air. And then someone stepped out. She was tall and graceful, with shimmering skin like Lyra's but more radiant. Her eyes were full of deep wisdom and gentle warmth. Her long hair flowed behind her like soft waves of light. She wore a smooth garment that changed color gently as she moved, like calm water touched by sunlight. Lyra gasped softly. Evan didn't need to guess. This was her mother. The woman looked around the desert with calm purpose. Then her eyes landed on Lyra, and everything else disappeared from her expression. Her face filled with relief, love, and overwhelming joy. She lifted both hands toward the child. Lyra ran toward her. Evan followed close behind, not wanting her to wander too far alone. But the moment Lyra reached her mother, she was lifted gracefully into warm, safe arms. The woman held her close, touching her hair gently, whispering soft musical tones that echoed like loving words. Lyra responded with her own soft melodies, snuggling into her mother's shoulder. The glow around them became brighter, wrapping them in a warm aura. Evan watched silently, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest. It was a beautiful sight, pure, gentle, and full of emotion. After a long moment, Lyra's mother looked at Evan. Her eyes softened with gratitude. She stepped forward with Lyra still in her arms. She brought one hand toward Evan's chest and placed it gently over his heart. A warm glow spread from her hand, not frightening, just soothing, like a silent thank you. Evan felt a wave of emotion flow through him. Images and feelings passed into his mind. Lyra's journey, the worry her family felt, the hope they carried, and the deep appreciation they now felt for him. None of it was loud or overwhelming. It was gentle, pure communication. "I'm glad she's safe," Evan whispered. Lyra reached out from her mother's arms and touched Evan's cheek lightly, giving him one last soft memory of them walking through the canyon together, of the blanket he had placed around her shoulders, of the quiet comfort she felt simply being beside him. More vessels landed peacefully nearby, forming a circle of warm, shimmering light. Other gentle figures stepped out, each one graceful and calm. They greeted Lyra with joyful expressions, then looked at Evan with quiet respect. These were not beings of harm or fear. They were a family, a community, a peaceful group who had crossed stars to bring one child home. The desert felt different now, more alive, more connected to something far beyond Earth. Evan stood quietly, watching Lyra finally safe in her mother's arms, but he also sensed something else in the air, something growing stronger. A choice was coming, something unexpected, something that would change Evan's life forever. Evan stood quietly in the warm desert air, watching Lyra rest safely in her mother's arms. Around them, the gentle vessels shimmered like pieces of the early morning sky. Soft colors moved across their surfaces, and a peaceful hum drifted through the air. Everything about this group felt calm and comforting, like a warm blanket wrapped around the land. Lyra's mother held her close, brushing a glowing strand of hair away from the child's face. Lyra looked peaceful now, finally safe after days of confusion and worry. Every time she glanced at Evan, she gave a small, grateful expression, as if she wanted him to know that she remembered everything he had done for her. Evan felt a warm ache in his chest. He had grown attached to her. In just a short time, she had filled his quiet life with soft melodies, glowing lights, gentle memories, and a sense of purpose he never knew he needed. Now she had her family back. He should have felt only relief, but instead he felt something else too, something he couldn't quite name. Lyra's mother stepped closer to him again. She spoke gently in her musical language, a soft flow of tones that felt warm even if Evan could not understand each word. But her expressions said enough. She was thanking him, deeply, sincerely. Another tall figure approached, a peaceful-looking member of their group who carried a small glowing device shaped like a clear stone. They pressed a few soft lights on the surface of the stone, and suddenly a warm glow spread across it. The device shimmered, and then a clear, friendly voice spoke in simple English. "Thank you for protecting our young one." Evan blinked in surprise. He glanced at the device, then at the peaceful figure holding it. You can speak my language?" he asked. The translation device glowed, and the gentle voice answered, "We can learn your language through light and sound." We used this to communicate with kindness. Evan nodded slowly. It made sense. Everything about them felt advanced yet calm, thoughtful and gentle. Lyra's mother stepped forward. The translation device captured her soft tone, and the English voice translated smoothly. You kept her safe when she was lost. You helped her feel calm when she was afraid. You stayed with her when danger came close. We are grateful. Lyra reached out her hand from her mother's arms and touched Evan's wrist. Her eyes glowed softly, full of affection and trust. Evan smiled and touched her hand gently. I'm glad she's okay, he said quietly. I'm glad you found each other. The sky above them shimmered again, this time brighter. More vessels were preparing to rise, gently lifting from the sand. It was clear the group was getting ready to return to their world. The air around them began to glow with warm, swirling colors. One of the peaceful figures approached Evan with calm footsteps. They bowed slightly, offering him a smooth, oval object that glowed softly in his hand. It felt warm, like holding a small sun. What is this? Evan asked. The translation device responded. A gift, a piece of our home's light. It will bring calmness, warmth, and guidance whenever you need it. Evan looked down at the glowing gift, feeling something inside him shift. He wasn't used to receiving meaningful things. His life had always been simple, quiet, almost empty. And now, here he was, standing in the desert holding a piece of another world. Lyra's mother stepped closer again. Her voice, translated gently, said, We wish to offer you something more. You showed great kindness. If you want, you may travel with us to our world. You will be welcomed as one of our friends. Evan stared at her, stunned off travel to another world. Leave Earth. Leave the desert he knew so well. It felt like a dream, soft, impossible, beautiful. Lyra watched him with hopeful eyes, as though she would love for him to come along. She held out her little hand toward him, inviting him. She didn't want to say goodbye. Not yet. Evan felt his heart tighten. He looked up at the strange sky filled with shimmering vessels. He imagined what their world might be like: floating lights, peaceful forests, gentle music, glowing plants, and skies full of colors. It sounded like something from a storybook, a place where quiet hearts could find new meaning. But he also thought about his cabin, his books, his long walks, the desert he knew so well, the simple freedom of Earth. He had lived alone for so long, yet he had always felt connected to the land. Could he really leave all of it behind? He looked at Lyra again. Her small, glowing fingers reached toward him, full of warmth. She didn't speak, but her eyes asked a question. Will you come with us? Evan slowly knelt down to her height. Lyra, he said softly, I will never forget you. Never. You are special. You are brave. You changed my life in a way I can't explain. Her eyes shimmered, and a soft glow filled her cheeks. But, Evan continued gently, placing a hand over his heart, my place is here, on this planet, in this desert. This is my home. Lyra's glow softened. She understood. Even though she was a child, she understood the meaning of home. She reached out and touched Evan's chest again. A warm memory flowed into him, a memory of their time in the canyon, holding her in the cave, sharing quiet melodies, her trust. It felt like a gift she wanted him to keep forever. I'll miss you too, Evan whispered, voice tight. Her mother stepped forward, gently lifting Lyra into her arms again. She bowed her head respectfully toward Evan. Your kindness will be remembered, the translation device said, and this child will always hold your spirit close. More vessels glided down, creating a soft path of glowing light. The air filled with warm colors again, swirling gently around the group as they prepared to leave Earth. Lyra looked back at Evan one more time. She pressed her little hands together and released a soft, musical sound, a goodbye note full of love. The sound floated through the air like a gentle ribbon of light. Evan placed a hand on his heart in return. Goodbye, Lyra, he said softly. You'll always have a friend here. Her mother carried her up the ramp, into the warm, glowing vessel. The door closed slowly, but through the transparent panel, Evan could see Lyra pressing her small hand against the glass. He pressed his hand toward her in return. Then the vessels rose slowly into the sky, lifting higher and higher. The desert wind blew gently around Evan as he watched the shimmering shapes move upward. The sky opened in a bright arc of color, welcoming the gentle travelers back into the stars. With one last burst of soft light, the vessels vanished beyond the shimmering arc, which slowly faded away, leaving only the natural sky above. Silence fell across the desert. Evan stood alone, holding the smooth, glowing gift in his hand. It pulsed softly, like a tiny heartbeat. He felt sadness, of course, but also peace. A deep, warm peace he hadn't felt in years. His quiet life was not empty anymore. He now carried memories that would stay with him forever. Glowing lights, soft melodies, gentle touches, and the bond he shared with the child from the stars. He walked back to his cabin, the desert stretching wide and golden around him. He placed the glowing gift on his table. It filled the whole room with soft, warm light. That night, Evan sat on his porch beneath the stars, listening to the wind. Everything felt calm again, but different. Bigger, more meaningful. He looked up at the sky and whispered, Be safe, Lyra. A tiny shimmer flickered far above, like a star twinkling brighter for just a moment. It made Evan smile. He knew he would never be the same again. He had seen a world beyond Earth, felt a love beyond words, and found courage beyond fear. And somewhere far away, drifting peacefully through the stars, a little child named Lyra carried his memory to holding it like a warm light from a desert night.